The jungle was quiet. Not even the wind moved. 12 American soldiers walked down a narrow path near the border with Cambodia. They didn't speak. The only sound was their boots in the mud. In the distance, they heard helicopters flying away. The first man in the line, Private Keller, walked carefully. His hands were shaking. Every bush, every tree looked the same. He stopped for a second and turned to give a signal. That's when it happened. A soft click, then a loud blast. The explosion hit like lightning. Dirt flew everywhere. A soldier screamed. The first man was gone, killed by a hidden mine. Gunfire came from the trees. Fast, sharp shots. The enemy was hiding. One soldier was hit in the neck. Another dropped to the ground. The Americans fired back, but they couldn't see who was shooting. The gunmen were already gone. 5 men were hit in just a few seconds. The rest never saw a single enemy face. This was War Zone C. It wasn't a normal battlefield. There were no clear targets. No safe places. The enemy hid in tunnels, set traps, and attacked without warning. They used the jungle like a weapon. Thousands of American troops entered War Zone C during the Vietnam War. Many didn't come back, and the ones who did, they never forgot it. If this story grabbed you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in more Vietnam War stories, check out the rest of the channel. There's plenty more just like this. War Zone C was not on most maps, but every soldier in Vietnam knew the name. It was a large area in Tây Ninh Province, in the northwest part of South Vietnam. It sat right next to the border with Cambodia. The land was wild and thick with jungle. The trees were tall and the ground was full of mud, rocks, and hidden trails. There were almost no roads. This place became one of the most important enemy strongholds in the war. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army used it to hide, plan attacks, and store supplies. They could move in and out of the area without being seen. When American forces entered, the enemy would disappear, either deep into the jungle or across the Cambodian border, where U.S. soldiers weren't allowed to follow. One of the biggest reasons War Zone C mattered was because it may have been home to something called COSVN, the Central Office for South Vietnam. It was the main command center for communist leaders in the South. Some believed it was hidden deep underground in the zone. Others said it kept moving, always one step ahead. The U.S. military wanted to destroy COSVN. Taking it out would break the enemy's leadership in the South, but they could never find it. The jungle helped the enemy hide. Thick trees blocked the sun. Aircraft and helicopters couldn't see the ground. The Viet Cong built tunnels, bunkers, and hidden camps that blended perfectly with the environment. Even with strong weapons and thousands of troops, U.S. forces couldn't hold the area. They tried many times. They would move in, clear a village or a trail, and then leave. As soon as they pulled out, the enemy came back. The location also made it a perfect place for moving troops and supplies. Trails led in from Cambodia, allowing weapons and soldiers from the north to flow into South Vietnam. It was like a secret highway system in the jungle. War Zone C was not just a place to fight. It was a base of operations, a hidden city, a supply line, a trap. The U.S. military knew it was dangerous, but they had to go in anyway. If they ignored it, the enemy could strike anywhere from the cover of that jungle. And so, again and again, American soldiers were sent in, hoping to clear it out, stop the attacks, and find the enemy's leaders. But War Zone C always pushed back. To most American soldiers, the enemy in War Zone C felt like ghosts. They were never where you expected them. They didn't stay and fight like regular armies. They attacked, disappeared, and struck again later, often from a different direction. One of their biggest weapons wasn't a gun or a bomb. It was the jungle itself. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese troops knew the land better than anyone. They moved through the trees without making a sound. They followed hidden paths that didn't show up on American maps. And when they didn't want to be found, they vanished underground. Beneath War Zone C was a massive network of tunnels. Some were simple, just a few meters long. Others stretched for miles. These tunnels were not just for moving. They were cities under the jungle. Inside the tunnels, the enemy built bunkers, meeting rooms, storage areas, kitchens, and even hospitals. There were sleeping quarters for soldiers, places to hide weapons, and escape routes in case of attack. They used vents to bring in air, and hidden doors made it almost impossible to tell where a tunnel started. From above, the jungle looked empty, but beneath the ground, the Viet Cong were watching and waiting. American troops often didn't know they were walking right over an entire base. When U.S. units attacked a village or camp, the enemy often slipped into the tunnels. Artillery and airstrikes couldn't touch them down there. Soldiers called them ghosts in the ground. Sometimes, special U.S. soldiers called tunnel rats were sent in to search the tunnels. These men were small, brave, and carried only pistols or flashlights. Their job was to crawl into the dark, tight spaces and clear them out. Many didn't come back. The jungle above was just as dangerous. The enemy placed booby traps all along the trails. Hidden mines, sharpened sticks in pits, tripwires attached to grenades. A single wrong step could take off a leg or kill a man instantly. Patrols had to move slow. Every vine, every branch, every mound of dirt could be a trap. And even when they were careful, ambushes came without warning. The enemy fired a few shots, then slipped back into the jungle. They left behind wounded Americans in silence. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about fear. The soldiers could never rest. They never knew where the next attack would come from. Sometimes they would sweep an area, declare it safe, and by the next day, it belonged to the enemy again. The Viet Cong didn't need to win every battle. They just needed to survive. The jungle gave them cover, the tunnels gave them time, and their patience made them deadly. In late 1966, American forces made their first big move into War Zone C. It started as a simple mission. The 196th Light Infantry Brigade was sent out to search for enemy troops and supplies. They expected small fights, quick attacks, and maybe a few enemy camps. But what they found was much bigger. While patrolling near the edge of War Zone C, American soldiers discovered a huge Viet Cong base. It was well hidden in the jungle, with food, weapons, medical supplies, and even written plans. The scale shocked them. This wasn't just a campsite, it was a major supply hub, ready to support hundreds of fighters. The mission changed overnight. The U.S. command realized they had stumbled onto something serious. They turned the patrol into a full operation. It was named Operation Attleboro. Within days, more and more troops were flown in. What began with one brigade grew to involve over 22,000 soldiers, including multiple infantry units and support teams. Helicopters dropped troops into landing zones deep in the jungle. Artillery bases were set up. Gunships circled above, ready to strike. But the enemy was ready too. As American forces pushed deeper, they were hit with strong resistance. Fire came from all directions. Sometimes from the trees, sometimes from hidden bunkers, sometimes from nowhere at all. The jungle made it hard to see, hard to move, and even harder to fight. The Viet Cong used hit-and-run tactics. They didn't stay and defend like a regular army. Instead, they hit hard, then faded into the jungle or vanished into tunnels. It was impossible to tell how many fighters were out there. Some units reported being attacked by small groups. Others ran into full battles with hundreds of enemy troops. Even though the fighting was intense, American troops kept moving forward. Day by day, they found more evidence of the enemy's power. In one area, they uncovered 1,000 tons of rice, enough to feed an army. In another, they found stockpiles of ammunition, medicine, and documents with information on future attacks. It became clear that War Zone C wasn't just a hiding place. It was a fully built war zone, prepared for long-term fighting. Still, the U.S. never found COSVN, the enemy's main command center. If it had been there, it was gone by the time soldiers arrived. The leaders had likely escaped across the Cambodian border, safe from U.S. troops. Operation Attleboro lasted for weeks. By the end, American forces had killed over 1,000 enemy fighters, captured tons of supplies, and pushed deep into enemy territory. But they couldn't stay. Once the operation ended, most U.S. units pulled back, and as soon as they left, the Viet Cong returned. War Zone C was too big to hold, too wild to control, too close to Cambodia to trap the enemy for good. Attleboro showed just how strong the Viet Cong had become, and how well they used the jungle to their advantage. It was a warning, a message. The enemy was not weak, they were hidden, and they were ready. After Operation Attleboro, American commanders knew War Zone C was a serious threat. They believed the COSVN, the enemy's main headquarters, was still hiding somewhere in the jungle. This time, they decided not to send in a small unit. They planned something much bigger, something that had never been done before in Vietnam. In February 1967, the U.S. launched Operation Junction City, the largest airborne assault since World War II. Over 25,000 American and South Vietnamese soldiers took part. It was the boldest effort yet to destroy War Zone C. The plan was simple on paper: surround the enemy, destroy their bases, and capture or kill the leaders of the communist forces. To do this, the US military formed a giant U-shaped trap in the jungle. They wanted to block escape routes to Cambodia, force the enemy into the open, and crush them with air power and artillery. It started with a thunder of helicopter rotors. Hundreds of choppers lifted troops into landing zones deep inside the jungle. In one part of the operation, American paratroopers from the 173rd Airborne Brigade jumped out of planes and landed in enemy territory, one of the only parachute drops in the entire Vietnam War. Artillery bases were dropped in behind them. Fire base after fire base lit up the sky with constant fire. B-52 bombers carpet-bombed the jungle before troops advanced. Soldiers pushed forward, searching for tunnel networks, bunkers, and signs of the elusive COSVN. In some areas, they found fierce resistance. Near places like Prek Klok, Ap Bao Bang, and the Soi Da River, American units came under heavy fire. The Viet Cong fought hard, using the jungle to their advantage. They attacked quickly, then vanished into tunnels and trees. Mines and booby traps slowed down the US advance. Even so, the Americans kept pushing. They destroyed hundreds of enemy camps and supply points. They uncovered bunkers filled with weapons, rice, radios, and maps. Tunnel rats were sent down into underground networks. Some tunnels went 3 levels deep, with hidden chambers, command rooms, and sleeping quarters. But COSVN was never found. It seemed to vanish again, just like during Attleboro. Some believed it had slipped across the Cambodian border before the operation began. Others thought it had split into smaller mobile units, always moving, always one step ahead. Operation Junction City lasted for 82 days. By the end, the US claimed over 2,700 enemy fighters killed and many more wounded. But the cost was high. 300 American soldiers died, and nearly 2,500 were wounded. On paper, it looked like a success. But on the ground, things felt different. The Viet Cong had taken heavy losses, but they weren't broken. They had survived another major attack. The jungle had protected them again. And once US forces left the area, the enemy moved back in. The same pattern repeated itself: attack, withdraw, and watch the jungle erase all signs of American presence. Operation Junction City was a show of strength. It proved that the US could launch massive operations, drop thousands of troops into combat, and fight hard in impossible terrain. But it also proved something else. The war wouldn't be won by big battles alone. The enemy didn't need to win. They just needed to survive. And in War Zone C, the jungle made that possible. After Operations Attleboro and Junction City, American forces had seen the worst of War Zone C. They had sent in tens of thousands of troops. They had dropped bombs, fired artillery, cleared tunnels, and destroyed supplies. But no matter how many times they pushed in, they could never stay. And once they left, the enemy came back. War Zone C was not like other battlefields. There were no cities to capture, no hills to hold, no front lines to defend. It was a battlefield that moved and changed. The terrain was one of the biggest problems. The jungle was thick and dark. It was hard to see even a few feet ahead. Soldiers moved slowly, watching for traps. The ground was soft, muddy, and full of insects. Rain made everything worse. Rivers flooded. Trails turned to deep mud. Helicopters couldn't always fly in bad weather, and trucks couldn't move through the thick trees. The jungle made it easy for the Viet Cong to hide and survive, and it made it hard for American troops to hold the land they fought for. Even when fire bases were built, they were often small, temporary outposts. Once an operation ended, most units pulled out. They couldn't stay forever. The Viet Cong knew this. They waited. They hid in tunnels or moved across the border. When the Americans left, they returned. It wasn't just the land that made it hard to win. It was the enemy's strategy. The Viet Cong didn't try to take ground and hold it. They attacked, then disappeared. They wore down the enemy, one ambush at a time. They made the Americans tired, nervous, and afraid. For US soldiers, the pressure never stopped. They could be walking for hours in silence, then get hit by a mine or a sudden burst of gunfire. Some patrols lost men without ever seeing who fired the shots. The stress added up. Many soldiers left War Zone C with injuries, not just to their bodies, but to their minds. They had fought an enemy they could barely see, in a place that didn't want them there. War Zone C became a symbol of the larger war. A war where advanced weapons, large armies, and big victories couldn't guarantee success. A war where holding ground didn't mean winning. A war where the jungle always waited to take back what was lost. War Zone C never truly fell. American forces entered again and again. They fought hard, cleared camps, burned bunkers, and dropped thousands of bombs. They won battles. They took ground. They killed hundreds of enemy fighters. But they could never hold it. Every time they left, the Viet Cong returned. The jungle closed in. Trails reopened. Supplies moved through. New traps were set, and the war started all over again. The truth was simple. The enemy didn't have to win. They just had to last longer. War Zone C helped them do that. It gave them a place to rest, plan, and wait. It gave them safety under the trees and deep in the ground. It gave them cover from the sky and protection from tanks. And the jungle gave them something more. Time. Time to rebuild. Time to hide. Time to outlast a superpower. For American soldiers, War Zone C was a nightmare. Every step could be a trap. Every bush could hide a gun. Every sound could mean nothing, or an ambush. It wasn't just a fight, it was survival, and it changed the men who went there. By the end of the war, War Zone C still existed. COSVN was never captured. The tunnels were never fully destroyed. The jungle was never fully cleared. It was one of the most dangerous places in Vietnam, and it stayed that way until the final days. War Zone C was not just a place, it was a lesson. It showed that strength, firepower, and technology don't always win. Sometimes patience and knowledge of the land can be stronger. Sometimes the jungle wins. If this story gave you a deeper look into what the Vietnam War was really like, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this. Stories of battles most people never hear about, but should. Check the channel for more Vietnam War videos, from forgotten operations to the soldiers who lived through them, and thank you for watching.